Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things magic, flavour design, and lore. I'm your host, Andy Man.
Pew! Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
What's the
Don't know. I've
what's
got
the
energy. I've had a tea. We're in an early record.
We're talking about a plane that absolutely does not have
pew
guns.
pew. Yeah, true. Yeah, no finger guns. This is as far away as like the cabarettes you can probably get. To be fair, in terms of.
Well, you say that because the elves on Lorwyn also have the little horns, like the elves on
They've got a little horn. Sorry, we're starting early today.
Cool. We are talking about Lorwyn today.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many sets that come out now that it's very hard to do things in order if we want to do them at all.
Well, if people are like, well, why are you talking about lore when you haven't even talked about Avatar? And I bet it's because Andy Man fucking hates Universes Beyond, so of course I'm not going to talk about that. First of all, stop, shush, hypothetical person out there. The Planeswalker Guide for Lorwyn Eclipse came out a few weeks ago, which I bet you didn't notice because there's too many Universes Beyond coming out. Exactly, proving Andy's point. But also we will talk about Avatar sometime between now and Christmas.
I actually quite like Avatar.
Yeah, both of us enjoy the show, so it's actually going to be one of those Universes Beyond where we can actually like legitimately enjoy having a conversation about it.
In theory. But ahead of Lorwyn Eclipse, the Planeswalkers Guides come out, so obviously we already know quite a lot about it, and some key arts come out and all that kind of thing. But Lorwyn, I think, as a set, it's been a fan favourite plane that people have wanted to go back to. And it's always weird when you do look back at it, because it's a weird fucking set, man.
Is it... So, this is the thing. Is it only fan favourite? And this is... I'm only playing devil's advocate because I fucking love Lorwyn. But is it only a fan favourite? Because people have been asking for it for so long. They've presented this rose-tinted thing of like, but it was such a good set. It comes from the before times where Magic wasn't shit and things weren't super power-crept. And they had this cool old-school design and things weren't hyper-realistic in the artwork. And it has all of these kind of in their mind, this is how they see the set because it was so long ago. Like, Shadowmoor was one of the worst-selling sets of all time.
Yeah.
And it was also one of the, in terms of block structure, one of the most interesting. It's the only time they've ever done 4 blocks, doing a two block for Lorwyn, like doing a beginning and end, and then a Shadowmoor with Eventide. So having four sets was a lot to be on the plane for. And by the end of it, I think people were pretty sick because I had this beautiful, lovely Lorwyn going into this murky, gross kind of Shadowmoor, and then we stuck around just that little bit too long. And by the end of it, I think people were like, can we please go somewhere else? So I wonder if it's only because it's been like, how many years now? What, like nearly 15? Something silly like that?
I remember being, it must have been about, I think it's longer than that, because I must have been about 10 or 11. It's when Pokemon cards really took off, so I must have been in primary school.
2007. 18 years ago.
Oh, 2007?
Mm-hmm.
Since Lorwyn?
Mm-hmm.
What came out? Oh, no, I'm not going to get into it. All I say is I remember. Maybe it was 17 then, because I do remember being...
It was right to the end of my high school.
Yeah.
It's just when I started playing Tardy. That's when I started getting to my rebellious stage where I went out skateboarding at night and stuff.
Oh, you're so cool.
Yep. We're doing a Magic podcast, Andy.
I don't know. I just remember seeing packs of this at the card shop as it was in my hometown, and like not knowing really what Magic was at the time. So yeah, I guess it must have been about 16, 17 then. I seem to remember it being earlier. Was I still into Pokemon cards when I was 16, 17? Probably. I was a bit of a secret nerd. And just the key art really was like, oh, what's this kind of interesting thing? Do you know why I think it's seen as being like in the grand history of Magic has a special place in people's hearts? Because it was a turning point as well where they introduced Planeswalkers, which was not a well received.
Because this was off the back of Time Spiral block. So we've just done Kamigawa, which had quite very cool. We've talked about Kamigawa at length, but cool concept, great art, power level. Then you had Time Spiral block where all for the old school players and for the I don't want to say good players, but the players that knew how to interact with all the complicated mechanics of that set, really engaging, but otherwise a little bit ostracizing. Then you went to Lorwyn, which was a very different swing to a lot of typical Magic.
Well, you had Ravnica in there. The first Ravnica set was after Kamigawa.
True, sorry, yes.
You know that. That's a long time ago.
That is a long time
ago.
So
what I think it is that if you actually look at Magic's history, we think of Magic as being this high fantasy card game, whereas the first 3, let's say, massive settings of Dominaria for the first 500 years of Magic, it was there forever. Ravnica, then Kamigawa. They're all very distinct, not necessarily European folklore planes.
Mirrodin as well was there before.
Well, Mirrodin as well, which is this kind of steely place.
Yeah,
and I think
this is the first cutesy.
Well, I think it's the first proper folklore reset. Whereas Dominaria obviously had tropes from, because it was meant to be the only setting in Magic for a long time. Well, after they binned the idea that they would be planes hopping, it's kind of they went flip-flopped on that. But Dominaria had a bit of everything. This was like the first time they went, oh no, let's get back to having like, goblins and, fairies and gnomes.
And very interestingly, no humans.
Yeah, no humans.
Like there's a couple of like, let's say human-like tribes in Lorwyn, but for the most part, it was a departure. And this again at the time was quite controversial, and another reason why certain people didn't stick to the set. Which is again why I think rose-tinted glasses, we're very used to now having weird stuff in Magic. So now this is almost like going back to something familiar, but at the time it was very unfamiliar.
Well, look at like Bloomburrow, for example. It's a great case study for, that's a set that decidedly had exactly no humans or any traditional creature types of any sort, and actually people saw it as a bit of a palate cleanser from what we were used to.
People can't help being furries.
So what we're doing is, we're not talking about the story. Vorthos casted a really good recap of the story, so go check that out if you want to. What we're looking at is the unique quote-unquote creature types of Lorwyn, because it set the groundwork for a lot of the creature types moving forward being popular at the forefront. But when you look back at it, it was playing so fast and loose with like creature typings on cards versus what those creature types were in actuality on the plane.
So it's almost like the races on the plane as you're talking about them won't match up with the creature type on the card. Like, so what I've noticed yesterday was I was redoing the Necron deck, and I had a card in there that was actively boosting zombies, and my brain for some reason just assumed, of course all Necrons are zombies, but they're not. They're Necrons, and it's kind of interesting to be like, okay, so there are certain naming conventions that they would do for a Universes Beyond and go, we wouldn't call the Boggarts goblins, we'd call the Boggarts Boggarts, and the creature type would be Boggart.
Yeah, well, I think maybe in like Origins era Magic that's what they would do, but I think nowadays they would call them Goblin because they're trying to consolidate a lot of the creature types. But this is, and like, look, the Overton window, that's the phrase that gets used a lot nowadays, moves quite a lot on that, right?
Do you think if they hadn't done Kithkin yet, Kithkin would be halflings as a creature type because we have had halflings in Magic since?
Yeah.
Or do you think that maybe they're going to they would have kept halflings out of the traditional Magic vernacular because it's only on Universes Beyond because of hobbits?
No, I think they would have done halflings to tie it in the same way that they do have orcs in Magic, but they've really only used that sparingly for one or two cards. I think if you're doing like a whole like sort of faction in a setting, they would use halflings, and the halflings would be called Kithkin.
Because there are times within this where we'll talk, and there'll be certain creature types that cover multiple different races within that umbrella.
Yeah,
and it's going to be interesting to see like why was sometimes like they it's like the Leonin cat thing, right? Of where sometimes they'll choose to give the creature type the broader umbrella, whereas sometimes they'll go, actually, we need to define specifically.
Well, aren't jackals? Jackals are still jackals.
I think jackals are still.
I
jackals.
do not. We're not getting into it. But what I guess what I'm trying to say is the only way I would see that they wouldn't do that, and they would say Kithkin as a whole new type, is because in the actual meta lore of Lorwyn, what would they be half of? True.
Yeah, true. Because you would need them to have, and this is another interesting thing because there are dwarves within this set, and that would insinuate a diminutive stature compared to
well, but I think fantasy dwarves like dwarf is just what they are.
Is race rather than
comment on their stature.
Fair enough. Anyway, we'll get into it.
A lot of this is also wildly offensive when you really dig into it.
And also, this was a plane. So the thematics around or mechanical, shall I say, like the Mel side of things, was creature typing. So there was classes and creature types abound, which is partly why you have things like changelings in the set. So it's actually a very important set to look at typings. We're not going to look at classes. That's a whole other thing we can probably do another time. But the type line of most of the creatures would be quite busy. So it's quite interesting when you see the occasional singular angel or dragon. But again, we'll get into it. We'll get into it.
So a lot of these creature types are based on Irish folklore, and that is often how Lorwyn is portrayed, as being it was the first true Celtic and Irish folklore set. What I will say is, just to kind of beat my English folklore drum a little bit, is that the British Isles in general, Ireland and the British Isles, to be very specific and to not have anyone shout at me, does share a lot of folklore, and indeed because a lot of the stuff in like Celtic and Saxon mainland Britain took inspiration or like shared ideas with Ireland, right? But when you're actually digging into a lot of these folklore things, they are very much like English folklore representations of some of the creature types that they go through. Mm-hmm. So pukas, for example, that we'll get onto.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting, right? How like I think in a lot of people's minds this is like full on Irish Celtic folklore, which is fine. And then Arthurian legend is what like English folklore brings to the table. But it is a lot more interconnected. I just think it's worth touching on.
We're also, as much as there is a great like divide, and there has been historical divide between the four different, Irish, Welsh, Scottish, English. Like our countries are really small comparative to some of the, somewhere like America. So a lot of the culture can bleed very easily because it's just 50 miles over there.
People move around.
Exactly,
like,
and the nomadic aspect of it, like the. Basically, the folklore of the British Isles and Ireland is very easily a hodgepodge because everything's very blended.
Yeah.
People might get angry about that as well. That's okay. Can't win.
Look, if the British Isles and Ireland weren't continuously angry at each other, or more to the point, angry at the English, we wouldn't be who we are. So
exactly.
Let's just get on with it. Right. Have you got a creature type to dive into first?
No, go ahead. You lead and I'll follow.
Let's talk about what I would always consider to be the sort of hero creature typing of the set, if only because they are the human insert and they are the mono white one, which I don't know if this is how you perceive Magic. Whenever I perceive creatures in sets, I always start, maybe it's just the Wooburg order, my mind goes like, well, who are the main creatures in the set? It's always the white ones.
So it's also the way that it's organised, right? It's like the whenever you go by a set, it always tends to start with the white cards because
it's just a huge bias.
Yeah.
Kithkin. Now, Kithkin are, as we've said, they're like the kind of humanoid insert. They are they're essentially hobbits, but they're not hobbits because they're a bit more warrior-like. They have like a standing army.
They're also way more active, yeah. Like the I know it's called them Kithkin. The hobbits want a peaceful life away from things, and it almost makes them feel like closer to I want to say like hedge witches and things like that. Like they sit very much within they live in the earth. They live in the hills, whereas Kithkin build buildings outside of the ground.
They're a bit more nomadic. And so Kithkin are an odd one because they feel very Lorwyn-y. But did you know the first Kithkins weren't Lorwyn based? They're not technically. This is where we immediately run into a roadblock. Because
wasn't there a Kithkin in Future Sight?
There was a Kithkin in Legends, which is Amru Kithkin, and which is on Dominaria.
Shut up.
So it's funny because we talk about Kithkin as if they are... We're going to talk about them as if they are unique to Lorwyn, because obviously that is what they're most associated with. But immediately we're finding that they're not unique to Lorwyn at all within the Magic multiverse.
Quick and agile, Amru Kithkin can usually escape even the most fearsome opponents. So they probably looked at that and went, when they were looking for... Because, I guess, because there's multiple Kithkin also in across the Time Spiral block, do you reckon they went, okay, we already knew that we're going to go there soon, so let's plant some already? And then it probably even looks like when they were trying to look at for a stand-in for humans, they probably looked through the history and went, well, we've got this Kithkin idea that's all the way... I mean, maybe they did, or maybe they just got completely lucky. But it's weird that they had Kithkin already in their minds.
But like Kithkin that they didn't necessarily use as a full, like... I'm gonna say the word tribe, but like as a full type group.
And the rebels, the Kithkin rebels from the Amru Haven and stuff, they do seem like a very small sect. And they don't appear to be exactly the same as the Kithkin from Shadowmoor anyway. Like, they feel a little bit more traditional.
There is early concept art for Kithkin, I think for Lorwyn, which shows them to be a bit more animalistic. So, like, there's one that shows them to be more like rat folk, and then there's another one that's
feral,
like a bird head. And so they probably thought, well, if we're going to have these kind of small halfling creatures, we might as well make them the humanoid insert. And also, I know, at least for Lore and Eclipse, they've admitted to using things like Dark Crystal, the Jim Henson film, which famously has no real human people in the film.
Yeah,
it's
because
all puppets.
they're weird, and they've got like the pushed faces, right? They've almost got like almost like
Gelflings.
snouts. Yeah, the Gelflings. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of going on there. Obviously, with Lorwyn, you have the Lorwyn side and the Shadowmoor side. So in Lorwyn, the Kithkin are these kind of like, as we say, they do have an army. They are warriors, but they are a bit more kind of attuned to Lorwyn as a whole, and they're just kind of nice.
They're farmers.
They're Shire folk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then in Shadowmoor, they turn into these kind of very aggressive, like bug-eyed, xenophobic, like almost like goblins to a degree. Like they basically become like the worst versions of themselves. Like their community turns into isolationism.
Yeah, because they've got the thought weft, right, which essentially creates a micro hive mind across their not society, settlements, and things like that. So, and this is something that's interesting that happened in the Phyrexian invasion, is that the Phyrexian invasion could really prey on that, because obviously the Phyrexians and the oil automatically have that hive mind communication. The thought weft was really easy for them to latch onto. And now when we're going to go to Eclipse, there's the traditional Kithkin that we're going to see that will be very recognisable, but then there's also these split off nomads that essentially have become detached from the thought weft to then have to join their own normal communities and kind of essentially become like a separated, like it would be so weird to go from being able to be part of the hive mind to then not become part of the hive mind and have to then separate yourself out because of the feeling of FOMO.
Yeah,
which is a very, very interesting thing. And then one thing that's going to happen, I think, a lot in Lorwyn Eclipse, because they're not doing one set for Lorwyn, one set for Shadowmoor. They've kind of gone, well, we're only doing one sets whenever we're not doing blocks anymore, so we need to actually show both sides at the same time. Which their way of fixing that was going, well, if we have it be that Shadowmoor and Lorwyn are both just fighting, and then each race can essentially choose which side they live in.
Yeah.
It's very cool, because different tribes will want to be either Shadowmoor or based on, because some of them get better during Shadowmoor, and some of them get worse during Lorwyn, and some of them don't really change much at all. But the Kithkin, I imagine, would prefer to be on the Lorwyn side because it's a little bit more cutesy, lovely.
Existence.
Yeah, but then who knows? maybe the ones that want to continue to be a little bit more protective and stuff, especially after the Phyrexian invasion, because Lorwyn essentially got riggedy wrecked, and it tore a lot of these like cutesy kind of tribes into being like, oh, okay, there are outside threats that we need to really worry about. And maybe that will then cause them to want to be more sheltered. And the Kithkin very much represent that duality of open community or shut off community.
Yeah, it's very white coded.
It is very white coded.
Just one last little thing then on Kithkin before we move on, because there's a few races to get through, a few creature types to get through. They seem to be the ones on the plane that, if we were to say go back there in like 10,000 years, I think would have caused some change, because you have, in the same breath of, you have Knight of Meadow Grain, which is riding this kind of sheep animal. You have Kithkin Zephynaut, who's a Kithkin who seems to have created a working flying machine. Yep,
you've got Sen's Tactician, who's like got plans and stuff. Like they're smart. They're smart little buggers. However, I would say the one look we've got of them, Figure of Fable, which is obviously a swing on Figure of Destiny from the original Morningtide thing, is that they seem to be going a little bit more bug-eyed, a little bit more fey, which might be just like they want to move them away from traditional human kind of qualities into being something a little bit more ethereal. I think by the end of it they become a avatar, but I think that happens in both anyway. Becoming avatar, avatar. It's all connected. It's all connected. Right, next.
All right, let's talk about goblins on the plane.
Yes, otherwise known as,
well, quite. Otherwise known as what? Because you have a fucking plethora of goblins on Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, and this is very much where I think they really went, look, we could make all these different things, but actually they're essentially all goblins. So the ones that I'm going to focus on are hobgoblins and boggarts.
Yes.
Boggarts, I think, are what you would consider the more traditional, so like goblin representation on Lorwyn. But even then, within, so there are 50 cards that have Boggart on them in some capacity, not just like the actual creature cards. And almost every single one depicts them in a different way. Yeah. You have your slimy, sort of almost like, bog creature Boggarts, like Boggart Harbinger. And then you have more traditional goblins, like Boggart Forager, Boggart Lodgers, Boggart Mob, Boggart. So this is where I think goblins on Lorwyn, and this is how I was trying to describe to you when I was pitching this episode, are the goblins on Lorwyn so unique in their boggartness and their hobgoblinness that they are more distinct unto themselves than, say, a goblin from Ravnica
or Fiora. Yeah.
Now, obviously,
Which I basically put in the same category. Grenzo and Kranko might as well have been the same. I mean, I know they don't look the same, but I mean,
but they are the same kind of
same
goblin.
style of
Same some humans don't look the same. What I will say is goblins is maybe a bad example because goblins on Ixalan look very different to goblins on Tarkir, for example.
Sure, but you don't usually have the same diversity within the same plane. Like, I'm looking at Boggart Sprite Chaser has 2 horns that are curved outwards. Then you've got Face Vaulter, which has the horns that curve inwards. And then you've got Bog Hoodlums that has a single unicorn horn.
Yeah.
So there is no... actually, I think there is an in-universe explanation for this as well. And I'm going to move to second page and Warren Weirding. Oh, I don't even need to. It's the bottom here. So Warren Weirding... 1 and a black, tribal sorcery goblin. We're not going to start talking about, kindred sorcery goblin. We're not going to get into that thing anyway, because we're mostly talking about actual creatures. But target player sacrifices a creature. If a goblin is sacrificed this way, that player puts 2 1/1 black goblin rogue creature tokens into play. They gain haste until end of turn. Flavor text. And that's when it was discovered that Boggarts have just half a brain. The Book of the Old Folk. Then there's another card that similarly talks about this. Weirding Shaman. 1 and a black for a 2/1. 3 black. Sacrifice a goblin to activate to put 2 1/1 black goblin rogue creature tokens into play. All Boggarts have an auntie, but they don't all have a mum.
Wow.
So the idea being that, and this is actually super powerful, Boggarts can essentially split themselves into 2 separate entities that then both grow up into being their own individuals. And this is also noticeable by probably one of the strangest goblin representations on Lorwyn. Which is Dreamhopper, which is an Is-It hybrid to play to cast. It's a 1/1 and an Is-It hybrid to give it flying. It's only got 1 arm, 1 leg, 1 eye.
Right.
And like many who dwell in Shadowmoor now, he was robbed of his better half by the Aurora. Now, like those kinds of puns, we don't get that anymore.
That's a good pun.
And it's funny that you've got such a wide variety, and I reckon, and you've actually kind of, there's even another type of goblin that we see as well in Spriggans, which are much more hulky, bulky, green tinged, like almost like Green Goblin style of where you have like the long pointy ears and a long pointy nose. And they're very different from the Boggart styles, which already have their own variety, and then also very different from the Hobgoblins, which are only in the Shadowmoor side, and they're more traditional in the fact they wear normal, like Hearthfire Hobgoblin is wearing like normal clothing, has a normal look, more of a normal human looking face, and is yellow tinged.
So it's interesting because Boggarts and Hobgoblins, if we look at where they come from in their etymology, Boggarts are actually from English folklore, very specifically English folklore, but it's even within the term, it's kind of a catch-all. And there's other fantasy media that plays on the origin of them being malevolent spirits that often take on the forms of people's fears, in as much as like they're kind of a bit poltergeisty. But then you also use that term for some sort of bog goblin as well. Like it seems throughout sort of like English and Irish history, it's a malevolent entity. Because even goblins have only taken on a physical form in like the past few centuries. They were forest spirits, right?
Yeah.
And then hobgoblins are, again, another English and Irish folklore for a house spirit that pre-Christianity was seen as being just like this kind of almost like helper gnome, like this kind of slightly tricksy but ultimately helpful gnome. And then after Christianity said that everything was evil unless it was Christianity, they became essentially like proto-poltergeists. Yeah. So the idea that they're this kind of more vicious, more like they're not trickstering as like, hee hee, I'm going to take your apple. It's more like, I'm going to stick this fucking poker up your ass.
Yeah, like, I guess from their point of view, that's fine, right? Like, but we're going to get to another race a little bit later, I feel like, are even more in terms of like, they epitomise that nasty mischievousness. So the thing about Boggs in general is, like, for lawmen is whenever they discover something new, they have to share it with everybody, and it creates that kind of community aspect of, oh my god, look at this cool weird thing that we've done. And I feel like they're going to lean into with Eclipse more on the bog side, the kind of like the hedge witchy kind of side, and they seem to be mostly focusing on, as goblins get older, they become more and more magical. And then when they eventually die, those glades, wherever they die, become infused with that magic. And I like this idea that that the goblins aren't just little rascals running amok or being like organised nuisances. I like this idea that they are like a wealth of knowledge. They just don't express it in a way that the other races like are willing to accept as intelligence. Yeah. Like they're earthly known. You know, but again, the variety that we see across, and this is where having 4 sets really, really helps a race, because you can investigate all of these different avenues. I can guarantee you now we will not get a Hobgoblin in Lorwyn Eclipsed. We will probably not get a Spriggan in Lorwyn Eclipse unless they only do 1 and 1.
Yeah, they'll do a reference.
Just as a reference. And even saying that, there aren't many of those in the original Lorwyn, but it's just nice to see such a wide variety across one particular creature type.
It's not... We can't really talk about red caps in this episode in too much depth because red caps are found across different planes in Magic, like in Eldraine. And also to like a greater degree. Red caps are essentially just small red caps. They literally wear a little red hood, sort of vicious little goblin creatures. So like we won't go too much.
Yeah, we've only got one of those in the set, but Goblin's very cool. Again, is it something that they could have done some as goblins, some as boggarts? Who knows? I'm glad they didn't, but it was definitely something that they could have chosen to do with how much diversity they had in the originally. Anyway,
I also I do think it's smart putting them all as goblins as a creature type as well.
We needed to for some cross synergies and things like that as well.
Yeah.
Too much diversity. That must have been like the sweet spot for them. It's probably why they also went into all the classes. Is that they need too many of the effects to sit in the umbrella, and it didn't work when you split all of the different. I'm going to show my ass here. Is it just called creature type and then creature class afterwards? But you had to have enough of each of them for the synergy to be able to work effectively. If there was too much dilution, there wouldn't be enough cross synergy. Right, what have you got next on the list?
Well, to talk about another creature type in Magic that isn't the thing that it's called, let's talk about the Flamekin.
Yes, because very much so. When this first came up, elementals.
They're elementals, yeah.
But there is a very distinct difference between the Flamekin now becoming Rhymekin in Lorwyn Eclipsed elementals, and then the other types of elementals that are on Lorwyn, which are nutter butters anything and everything you could possibly think of. And
also, the Flamekin on Lorwyn, although visually they might share motifs with other elemental humanoids across Magic, they very much are their own thing. I mean, and also not to be confused with the Flame-Kin of the Boris Legion.
Yes, which are flame elementals put into armour, but they are not of themselves sentient.
They use things like spark elementals and
stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's also like it's essentially a flame weird.
Yeah.
Instead of being gelatinous, it's volcanic.
Yeah, it's the Boris versions of weirds, and these are very Irish inspired. Now, I actually couldn't find much distinct Flamekin etymology or roots, other than the fact that the concept of fire elementals and then trees being on fire and then sacred trees and that kind of big mishmash of ideas, they created this creature type for Magic to kind of be sort of a foil to the tree folk of like Lorwyn.
I suppose, yeah.
So I kind of, and also you see a lot of the motifs, like they have the kind of like Celtic motifs kind of burned into the barky skin of the Flamekins, kind of give them that motif. There was a couple of sources that said that they were on Dominaria as Flamekin, but I can't find any cards that support that.
And even then, when I'm looking, because I did the same thing, I looked at the Flamekin on the fandom wiki. Like, it doesn't it says what they are, but it doesn't really talk about where they came from. Because I wanted to know, was there a distinction between them and the elementals that are more expressions of wishes and ideas and feelings, which all come from the primal beyond. The Flamekin elementals will sometimes travel to the primal beyond, but they are not inherently from the primal beyond.
Yeah.
And traditionally they don't settle, as much as there is a Flamekin village, specifically that card in the Lorwyn block. They typically don't settle together very much. They are much more nomadic. They're much more willing to go off and do their own thing. I mean, Aisling the Pilgrim, perfect example of someone who's just barreling around the plane, off doing their own thing.
They do seem to derive their power as well from the greater fire elemental in the original stories, because a lot of big part of the Lorwyn story is that Aisling takes the power of the greater fire elemental at several points, and which deprives other Flamekin, where they become Cinderkin, where they're like burn out ash huts.
Yeah, and it's also and then how she becomes the Extinguisher in Shadowmoor. Which is quite, as you've just mentioned. So Flamekin during the Lorwyn side of things are a little bit more, because they go by Path of Flame. There we go.
Yeah.
So the Flamekin follow the Path of Flame, but then traditionally when they became Cinders, they would essentially be bereft of any good feeling. It would be almost like they'd enter this depression of where they're smouldering out, and they essentially essentially burn themselves out. Now, after the Phyrexian invasion, and then after accepting this and almost like coming to terms with their altered state as Rhymekin now with their blue flame rather than their red flame, it's now actually they're now kind of split, and you've got the ones that want to stay on Lorwyn and continue to travel and be nomadic, and then you've got the ones who settle together and create more of a civilization and more of a social structure on the Shadowmoor side. So if anything, the Phyrexian invasion for the Flamekin have kind of changed their perspective of being, bright and ecstatic and exuberant versus, despairing when they're in Shadowmoor, and actually given them a greater purpose. Because apparently now that there is an automatic change with the Aurora, the journey back from being a Rhymekin to being Flamekin is a long and arduous process to re-warmth their fire back up again.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are like, you know what? Not my cup of tea. Don't want to bother. Which is another cool thing about going to Lorwyn Eclipse, of where the races get to choose which side of their representation they want to be. Do I feel more like a Flamekin, or am I more of a Rhymekin?
Yeah.
And that to be able to choose that identity instead of it being robbed of you each time the Aurora happens is super cool. Super cool.
I think it's very early 2000s fantasy design for the Flamekin, where they are like they have so much going on. They're like bark tree folk with fire, and then a bunch of like Celtic livery, and then they also wear clothes. I just think it's like if they were designed today, they would have actually not done the clothes aspect.
They also look very close to the Jinn for me from
they do look a bit like
from
Jinn, yeah.
Tarkir, and I'm glad that they've kind of moved away from that, because the two did start to look a little bit too synonymous. And yeah, it's kind of hard to put down exactly. I can't imagine what they would feel like.
What do you mean they would feel like if one gave you a hug?
Yeah, I can't imagine what the texture of their would it be more like ceramic? Would it feel more like wood? What is
I mean, I think it'd feel like bark, like ashen bark.
And I wonder then, is there a time where I wonder if the first, 'cause that's the thing that annoys me, we didn't get enough of a backstory about them to know where the first Flamekin came from, and things like that. Is it something that we might go into and see in Eclipsed?
Next one?
Yeah, let's
okay.
go.
I see.
What have we got next?
Let's talk about Merrow.
Yeah.
Merrow. So again, this is very much a bit like the Goblins thing. Merrow are merfolk. So you can't, there's no getting around that. So
they are fish people.
Are the merfolk of Lorwyn enough of a thing to be considered unique to that plane? Or are we just splitting hairs here because they've got a different word for it? What do you think?
Do we have to start talking about physiology as well?
Well, they are the most distinct looking from every other merfolk.
Because I did have it in my mind. I was like, are they the first ones to have the just the traditional tail fin? But then I remembered Lord of Atlantis and his original artwork and how that's the red
sure,
and
yeah,
blue
the Dominarian
curved over.
merfolk are kind of a bit sort of. But again, I sort of feel like if you're going to talk about magic and other planes, you have to just sort of go. And Lorwyn, but whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's Dominaria. Dominaria did it, and that's also fine. Dominaria did everything. It's The Simpsons.
I also feel like Merrows are the first time that we really see them feel like
fish people.
Yeah, but they also have this real civilization aspect to them, because let's kind of talk colours a little bit as well. So Merrows, so tradition. Let's look at the opposite from Ixalanis, right? Who have legs. They're a little bit they feel like humanoids with fish features, whereas Merrows feel like fish with humanoid features.
Yes.
And it's funny that the Ixalanis are a Simic, whereas all of the Merrows sit within blue-white in Lorwyn and then blue-black in Shadowmoor.
Yeah.
Kind of within that Esper kind of thing. And that's mostly because that community aspect they have in Lorwyn kind of falls away to their more darker sides and more the traditional thing you'd expect from a bad merfolk, which is cool, look at my pretty face, drag you down to the depths, kind of thing. And they're not prettied up at all. They don't look like sirens. They don't look particularly
no, I mean, if you look at something like Sig Riverguide, he has a fish face.
Yes.
And webbed hands. And again, they revisited these themes in Eldraine. Eldraine, the more you look back at Lorwyn, the more you realise just how much Eldraine paid lip service to that set in a lot of its design. I mean, so Merrow, the idea of the Merrow is basically Irish mermaid. That is essentially where that kind of idea comes from. And obviously, Ireland being an island and Britain being an island, there's lots of sort of seafaring mythology and folklore, but also a lot of river folklore as well. I mean, every country in the world has rivers, but I mean, God, we see it still today. I live on a narrow boat. Do you know what I mean? I go through the canals and rivers of England. And there is so much culture and community on those kind of that river folklore. So it really is kind of intrinsically linked to all those things. I mean, Sig's the river guide when it goes in Lorwyn, and then when it's in Shadowmoor, he becomes basically River Cutthroat. And
yes.
They become river brigands.
They're much more willing to engage with the other races on their Lorwyn side, and then they're very much like get out of our waters when it's on the Shadowmoor side, which makes more sense. They do again feel very much like they don't traditionally involve themselves with the outside world, typical to what I'd say like the Atlanteans from like the Marvel universe of like we didn't see Namor for a really long time because we didn't need to. They just stayed in their little like sea part of the world.
I think the thing that makes them distinct from the merfolk of other settings is that merfolk a little bit they're blue elves, right? A lot of the time that's how they're kind of like portrayed. They're sea elves, right? So they tend to be quite mysterious. They have like hidden knowledge that other races couldn't possibly understand. And like they kind of have this kind of affinity for nature. I think the Merrows of Lorwyn feel a lot more accessible to everyone else, and it's just that they are like just the river folk. Oh, pardon me, hiccup. So I kind of feel like that's how they are distinct in themselves.
So there is also a distinction on Lorwyn. It's funny that this almost seems to happen with every single race, because within the Merfolk, you've got your traditional Merrows. And it's kind of funny that I'm now looking through all of them, that it seems like only a couple of them even bother wearing clothes. And the fact that Sig does wear clothes means that he clearly spends more time outside of the river than a lot of them do. You've also got Selkies.
So, yes, Selkie is another sub-creature type. There are 3 Selkies. Cold-Eye Selkie, you have Selkie Hedgemage, and
Wistful
Selkie. So Selkies are they're sea lion merfolk.
They're sea lion centaurs,
as they're depicted in magic.
In magic, yes.
In folklore, what it is it's the idea that it's usually a beautiful woman figure that wears the skin of a sea lion, and then that's how they traverse through the waters. And then they come up and they like lure people with their beautiful woman form, and then they put the sea lion body back over, and then they do sea lion-y trickster stuff. It's very vague. Basically, it's fucking like dehydrated, sleep-deprived sailors see a sea lion and go, "Look at that beautiful woman!" What I mean? And go in and try and chase them and drown.
It's probably the truest like siren mermaid kind of thing.
100%.
It's probably the traditional version of that kind of folklore and that mythology.
It's odd that they haven't. It is actually odd that they haven't come back to Selkies and other sets, because I mean, look, for the best will in the world, I know magic has to look like magic, but you can do merfolk differently, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that they haven't done like merfolk differently for other sets. They do tend just to be frilly blue people.
Yeah, and they always tend to look kind of the same. I'm looking again through this list of merfolk, and they all look so radically different. You've got bright orange, bright yellow. You've got some like Merrow Wave Breakers that just looks like fish with arms. Like, it's nice to see that the art direction was allowed to be so flexible. Again, this comes from being able to do 4 different sets, so you can have a lot of different artists interpreting things differently, and it does just show like a diversity across that race just on one plane, instead of going, cool, I know what an Ixalani merfolk looks like.
Yeah.
If you just show me the artwork and not the card, couldn't tell you which fucking card it was because they all look the same.
Yeah. Alright. I'd say the Merrows of Lorwyn are definitely more unique. Let's talk about Noggles!
Yeah.
The fuck is going on here?
And we know for sure we're gonna get more of them.
Yeah, I know.
Because there's one, like, the only picture that we see under other creatures on the Planeswalker's Guide to Lorwyn Eclipse is a Noggle doing what all Noggles love to do. Now, how many Noggles are there in the game, Andy?
Well, there are 4. There are 4 Noggle creature cards, and then they're referenced on a couple of other cards.
Yeah, because it's funny that they went for... I just realised what they would be called otherwise. You can't call them ass folk, right? Because that's what they are.
Grey folk?
They're ass folk. Because they are essentially donkeys.
So they are
with like, they're donkey satyrs.
They're donkey-headed humanoids that are apparently the size of Kithkin.
Right.
They're Kithkin size.
So they're halfling size, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the nearest folklore I can find is... there are water horse spirits in Irish and English folklore that are referred to as Nuggles, Nuggles, and Nuggy, and that's about as close as I can get. But it's so funny that horse water spirits both in rivers and sea mythology across the world, are so ubiquitous because you have things like hippocamps, and obviously the traditional seahorse.
And we've got a couple more that we're going to get through just on this set alone.
Horse-headed spirits, and then more specifically horse-headed water spirits, seem to be like this weird thing in humans' minds. The kind of weird chemical makeup that we fear things like this way.
I guess because they're not only because they are ridiculously big, powerful. They're the biggest creature that the British Isles has to manage, right? Because we don't have bears or bison or anything like that.
We killed all the bears. We killed all the boars.
So in terms of like power and strength, but then also something that is very familiar because we use them all the time for farming and things like that. I can understand why that mythology, like. I'm a drunken farmer at the end of the night, and I see something a little bit spooky. It's probably going to be a horse.
A horse skulking through.
Because it's not going to be a cow because they're over there lowing and sleeping, you know?
So noggles, they behave like goblins.
So it's interesting. I wouldn't be able to distinct some of the flavour text from the noggles from some of the flavour text of the goblins, but just to put you in the frame of mind, noggles live purely by what they can scavenge. There is not a single thing that a noggle eats, wears, or uses that did not belong to someone else.
Yeah.
It's always funny till someone gets hurt, then it's hilarious. Noggles believe that they were the first race to ever walk Shadowmoor. They don't steal, they just take back what's rightfully theirs.
Yeah.
They look like arseholes. Noggle Bridgebreaker is literally just like... And the only artwork that we have is a Noggle with his tongue out, single thing, just kicking something.
Yeah.
Little shit. They are the epitome of Donkey from Shrek.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny that they kept them for such a small slice. And again, only 4 creatures, and in a set that wanted there to be, you know, like more umbrella terms. The Noggles don't have any synergy with anything. Obviously, you've got 3 rogues and a wizard, so they can fit into the class synergies. But otherwise, they don't really do anything distinct.
Oh yeah, no, a wizard as well. They're all blue-red hybrid.
Yep. So they're very Izzet, but they're like the least Izzet thing you could think of in terms of what we'd consider to be like. Whenever I think of Izzets now, Izzet creatures now, I would think of elementals, Jinn, things like that. I wouldn't think folk.
Do you know what it is? If we're saying that the Boggarts have like a weird sort of like earthly wisdom to them, but because they can't express it, it's kind of locked away in their boggarty brains. Noggles is the kind of stolen valor of. They think they're the most noble creature type on Lorwyn, but actually they're just twats.
Yeah, they're absolute douchebags. Yeah. Like modern day patriots. You know, I'm the best thing ever. Rah rah rah. No, you're not.
Turns out to be the worst thing in the gym.
Yeah, you are literally.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's Noggles.
And it's so bizarre because you never see them in any other planes, and yet we're going to get more of them.
They are truly unique to Lorwyn, which, I mean, maybe they are the progenitors of all life on the plane.
I mean, again, there's plenty of other horses that we're going to look at.
Well, let's move to another.
Yes.
Pukas.
Yes, so to essentially, I guess, bury the lead on this, there are 3 types of shapeshifter that we are going to be looking at. I guess technically 1.5, because I forgot that mimics are just the Shadowmoor version of changelings.
Sure.
However, Puckers are listed as shapeshifters within the creature typing of Lorwyn, and there are only 3 references within across the entire set, and they are only present in the Shadowmoor side of things. And Puckers are traditionally shapeshifters that can be in multiple different forms, humanoid or otherwise, but they traditionally take the form of a dark horse.
Ironically, the Old English name of Pucka or Puka, which comes from the Irish word puka, is Old English for a goblin. So it really puts paid to this idea that spirits and goblins are sort of the same mythology that just over the years kind of gets sort of separated out. I mean, they are, you know, imps, spirits, sprites, ghosts. It's only once stories started being shared as they were written down that these ideas got more formulated, like
defined,
delineated into fairies or fae folk are this and goblins are that.
Yeah.
You know?
If anything, fantasy writing and everything has created its own distinct world and what we expect goblins, orcs, witches to look like. But back in the day, it was just everything was a type of malevolent sprite or a type of beneficial sprite, and it was only because, as you say, different cultures had their own different understandings, and when you mash those all together, it's like, oh, we've got all these different options. It's like, yeah, but they're all the same thing.
Yeah.
They're all the same thing, which is kind of funny when you look at Pukas, because they did another horse thing alongside the donkeys, which is funny because they are specifically donkeys, not horses, because we did horses with the Pukas. But there's also Kelpies in Lorwyn that they specifically couldn't go with horses for because they've done horses these other times, and instead they went with a more bestial kind of look, because you could have done...
Which is, Kelpies are another, like hippocamps,
Yeah.
are another water horse.
Exactly,
spirit.
and we have had fish horse be the thing for the hippocamps, but you couldn't do horse for the Kelpies because it would look too distinct or too close to the pukas, but you couldn't make pukas look like anything else. And it's funny that they had the options to kind of make pukas look like anything.
Yeah.
And even on the wiki page, they don't look horse-like. It looks like it's a humanoidly looking kind of picture. They are known to be horse-like, and it's funny that they honed in on that, and then they went, okay, right, so then for for Kelpies, let's do something different. And it's kind of funny they had all these different options, and that's where you kind of can see the betrayal of this wasn't designed by people who were of the British Isles.
Sure.
This is designed by people who are looking at the law of the British Isles, and they're making their own artistic interpretations of them.
It's very interesting how... I mean, I guess I was about to say, how would this set be designed from scratch if it was being designed now? But I suppose that's what Eldraine was, where they did do
100%,
more... I'm not going to say accurate, because it makes it like... I'm not trying to... Like, you have to... Okay, to get a little bit political, and I allowed it for now. It's a difficult thing for me as a white Englishman to sit here and try to put the importance on being accurate with British and Irish folklore at the same level as being accurate with, say, like Kamigawa and Japanese folklore, or Kaladesh / Avishkar and Indian folklore, right? Because Western fantasy, which comes from British and Irish folklore, is not misunderstood or misrepresented.
No. And also, even if it is, we don't really get to complain about it.
But also, like, who fucking cares? Like, you know, we don't need to bang the drum for it. I mean, I did a bit at the start of the episode, but only to kind of zap my Irish sort of like brethren. I have my grandmother's Irish. I have Irish cousins and aunts.
I'm a McGrath.
Yeah, and so it's to give them a bit of business. But by the way, I am not Irish. That does not make me Irish.
Yeah, no, exactly.
just to really make this clear,
through, yeah.
I am English, but I'm going to give them a bit of the business. So I'm not here saying that it's the same level of importance to kind of like make this distinction. I think to the point that we're trying to make, if they were trying to be a bit more accurate, they absolutely wouldn't have chucked everything at this, and they would have picked several tentpole things. Do you know what I mean?
And I think the interpretation isn't false. It's just not entirely on the money. And I guess this is where fantasy and artistic licensing with fantasy is kind of nice, because you can be flexible, and it's just kind of what works, what aesthetically works. And a lot of these stories were like ways to frighten children, or ways to give like or have like moral stories. And for that, again, you will cultivate and change the law to fit what you need it to be. You know, so a lot of these stories would change. Because a lot of the stories came from spoken word, and they would change in each iteration based on the person telling the story. So it's not really like this is how it should be. It's more like these are the ways that they work, that you can interpret it. And it's kind of funny that they went with certain ways, and they went in certain directions instead of others on some specific creature typings.
Yeah.
What have we got next? What have you got next on your list? Oh, I've got a good one.
I think I've got. Do I have one more?
I have two. I have two more.
No, I think that's it for me.
Okay, so giants on Lorwyn are interesting, right?
Are you saying they're distinct enough? I wasn't sure.
So I would have had we not done Eldraine, because my instinctive. So when we look even on Lorwyn Eclipse, like the only picture they show for giant shows a giant with like roots and bark and foliage and everything on the back like a cape. Now, Realm Cloak Giant isn't from Lorwyn. No. It's from Eldraine. Yeah. So it almost felt like Eldraine kind of went, oh, maybe we'll take that side of things and we'll run with it. And then I don't know exactly how we're going to go back to giants and how they're going to be seen on this side. I think it was just funny that they had very, very, very small people alongside very, 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 very big people. Yeah. And those are the only real humanoid, you know, the typical anatomically looking like a normal human that you have on the plane. I suppose the middle ground would be the Flamekilling elves of the plane, right? Of course, yeah. We're not going to talk about elves because apart from them being short-lived, they essentially fit into the very much... It's essentially Lord of the Rings, a little bit more feral. Yeah, elves of Lorwyn, unfortunately, aren't distinct enough. They have things that are distinct to Lorwyn elves, but it's all very elf-coded, so what's the point? And I feel like there are two types of giant in this. And there are some that just look like your traditional, normal, trolly kind of giants. But then there's some like the thunderclap Thundercloud Shaman, where it has the cloud following him around.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And then there's another one that I really enjoyed. Oh no, I've scrolled too far. I've lost you again. Hamlet back Goliath, of where the goblins have like created their own little like picnic area on his back, and it's got a tree growing out of him because they're that much. Again, to have trees growing out of your back, you have to be pretty connected down
and
to
also
the earth.
to not really notice.
Yeah, to not really notice.
Hamlet back Goliath is one of my favourite cards in all of Magic from like top down theming, mechanics, the whole thing, and was the reason that I built my Zeatora the Incinerator deck.
And I think that they sit almost like beyond the regular races, that they're so old and so large that it's almost like they just live with the plane, and the rest of the races live along or on top of them. So I'll be interested to see what happens when we go back to Lorwyn, if they give them any other more distinction. Otherwise, they're a little cool. Otherwise, they're just big dudes. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about, I guess, lastly, was oofs, because oofs are a strangely broad creature type now.
They're also not unique to Lorwyn anymore.
No, well, they weren't to begin with. Like they were. Yes, there's been errata, but like so, Findhorn Brownie is a brownie originally, but they've been errata to being an oof. As with Nile Sylvain was originally just a Nile Sylvain, but it's just been errata to be an oof. That's from the Dark, whereas I think the brownie originally was from Ice Age. So we're talking like real far back when there wasn't really any standardization of creature typing and things like that. And again, both of these cards have been errated, but we have obviously got oofs on. We've got a couple of Mirrodin, but they look like Wolfolk, which is kind of interesting. I think we've already spoken about this the last time we talked about oofs, because they're not. Eldraine also has their own, which look a little bit more like Ixalani goblins. In fact, they're like furry little trolls.
Yeah.
Whereas the oof from Lorwyn, I can't really tell you what they are, because Gilderbairn is wearing a onesie.
Yeah.
Glimmerbairn, which I assume is also from Lorwyn, even though it's from Modern Horizons 3, I think, is wearing a butterfly onesie.
Yeah.
Who knitted that? Or was it magically created around them?
The oofs seem to just be like the kind of the manifest innocence of the plane.
And yet you've also then got kitchen finks, which are the most gremlin-y gremlins I've ever gremlined in my life, and dusk urchins.
Are kitchen finks from Lorwyn, are they?
They're Shadowmoor originally.
What kitchen? Whose kitchen?
Well, Kithkin, the Kithkin kitchens.
The Kithkin kitchen.
Exactly. But you've also then got dusk urchin, which they spawn from Shadow, wreaking chaos until Shadow claims them again, which look essentially like the fucking demons from the Scooby-Doo live action film, with their little like ears and everything going. Yeah. So to have those two sides, but not, and again, like it's not like Gilderbairn's from from Lorwyn and the Dusk Urchins are from Shadowmoor. Gilderbairn's from Eventide. So the last oof we see, because we see Dusk Urchins and Kitchen Feeks first, and then we see Gilderbairn.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on?
Well,
so the distinction isn't even distinct. It's almost the distinction is a diversity.
Yeah.
Which, as I say, I think is actually true of a lot of them. The distinction of goblins on Lorwyn and Shadowmoor is their diversity. And not just across both light and dark sides of the plane, but even within the light and dark sides of the plane, there is a diversity as well.
I kind of feel like it's almost like Lorwyn, this is not a pun, nor is it approaching one, but it sounds like it should be one. I feel like Lorwyn, as a design of a plane, can't see the wood for the trees of its own design.
Yeah.
Because it's so reliant and so wrapped up in this Shadowmoor Lorwyn cycle, which is amazing. It's great in its own right. The night and day sort of cycle, again, which they tried to do again on Innistrad, but didn't quite pull it off in the same sort of way. It's a great mechanic, but what it does cut off is an understanding of, say, how mana affects the plane. Because what I'm getting from a lot of these creature types, if we were to examine it with a more modern design lens, is that things like oofs and goblins and giants are representations of the plane's essence, and it just so happens that it's like that's how a giant manifests when it's more kind.
Well, I guess we didn't. I guess we didn't talk about the fact that the Boggarts don't just sit in red like they do traditionally. And most, like the goblins aren't just red; they're black and green. So they're much more feral, a lot more. Again, the black goblins, the Boggarts feel, and these are the swampy ones that I feel like we're going to see more in Lorwyn Eclipse. The ones that feel much more in touch with the ley lines.
Yeah,
and it's funny that they are back to being almost like. What's Strixhaven? The Golgari Strixhaven
Witherbloom.
Witherbloom. They feel way more Witherbloomy. And then in a similar vein, again, because we haven't touched on them, the tree folk of Lorwyn are distinct in the fact that a lot of tree folk are just animated trees in other sets.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas these ones have faces and hands and
yeah,
characters
they're the
and
great
names.
Deku tree, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're the Great Deku Tree. And 34 out of the 105 so tree folk are all from the Lorwyn block. Again, it helps you've got 4 sets, but if a third of all of the creature type of that particular race is from one particular plane, it makes me feel like the tree folk of Lorwyn are the most... If it hadn't been for us doing Lord of the Rings and getting Treebeard, this was their way of going, we're doing Treebeard.
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
And I wonder, going back, how many of these tribes are going to keep their diversity versus how many of them are going to keep their distinction. Because even with a little bit of the key arts and stuff, I can see that the goblins are way more Boggarty.
Yeah.
They look a little bit more hedgy than they do, say... They don't look like Dominarian goblins of where they're going out and with their armour and fighting things. It feels way more like, I've got a frog on a stick. You know, there's even one Boggart where it says that caterwauling Boggart.
Yeah.
And the flavour text is, I don't think the frog on the stick serves any purpose. And that's perfect, Boggart.
Yeah.
That's perfect. But there's a flame kid literally watching over going, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Perfect Lorwyn. Races looking at each other going, you're a bit weird. And they go,
weird.
no, you're a bit weirder.
You're a bit weirder, yeah.
So let's see how weird we stay, I guess.
We're not going to talk about Boggles because up until they would have been unique to the plane, and then what's the big Ikoria gave us Slippery Bogbonder.
Yeah, Slippery Bogbonder. Very straight. And Boggles are just kind of again another different type of sprite, right?
They're like froggy, rivery sprites.
Exactly.
Look, Lorwyn's weird, man. I don't know what to tell you. I am looking forward to Lorwyn Eclipse because it feels like they are going to refine it back a bit. And I think they're going to give us maybe the design of the set that people had in their mind when the first Lorwyn came out, right?
Who do you think did spiritual concepts better, the Kami or the Elementals of Lorwyn?
Oh, well, I mean, very different cultures.
I know, but because I think that's what they're probably going to lean on more for Lorwyn Eclipse, is it's going to be more of the incarnation style of things, of where they had like, you know, guile, vigor, purity, brawn. No, that's Dominaria. Anger's Dominaria.
Oh.
What? Fear. Hostility. There we go, those ones.
I kind of feel like the Kami of Kamigawa are maybe better manifestations of like another realm of spirits.
Sure. Yeah. The Primal Beyond is definitely an interest. I think they might go into it a little bit because we're going to need to find out how the incarnations of Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, Isui and whatever the other one's called, I can't remember now, but there's a Dusk and a Dawn incarnation that are going to be very pivotal to the story. So we'll end up talking about those a lot more when we get closer to the set.
Yeah.
But as a view, it's nice to see how complex a plane Lorwyn was for essentially being simple folklore. And I'm curious as to see how much of that they can keep when you're essentially going down to 25% of the real estate.
Yeah, we'll see. Let us know on Bluesky and via email what the fuck is our thing?
Magic the flavouring.
MT flavouring. I've completely blanked on what our thing is. mtflavouring@gmail.com. That's it. And you can find us on @Bluesky. You can also find us on Twitter, but we're not necessarily doing much on there anymore. Let us know what you're looking forward to for Lorwyn Eclipse. Let us know what your favourite representations of horse spirits are throughout Magic. And do you have anything else to say?
No. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Have a lovely day. You've been listening to Magic Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.